We are joined now by a member of the House Freedom Caucus, the group considering articles of impeachment against Rosenstein. Matt Gaetz is a Republican congressman from Florida. Good evening to you, Congressman.
Good evening.
Okay, so you've probably heard a little bit from the Deputy Attorney General responding to this. I want to play a little bit more of what he had to say today when this topic came up.
Yeah, there have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted. We're going to do what's required by the rule of law.
What do you make of that? He says you're not going to be, or people who are making threats about his position are not going to be extorting the DOJ.
Well, earlier you played a clip where Rosenstein said no House Republicans would put their name on these articles of impeachment. I think Mr. Rosenstein ought to be more worried about what he's put his name on. For example, the FISA warrant renewal. After the FBI knew that Christopher Steele was lying and was not trustworthy, Rosenstein himself signed the document to spy on an American citizen with no justification. He also put his name on the pleading to silence the whistleblower in the Uranium One case. Now, I'll say this. Rod Rosenstein's understanding of extortion seems to depart from the law. The definition of extortion is forcing someone to do something that they have no legal obligation to do under some threat. Rod Rosenstein has an obligation to follow the law. That's all we want him to do. And what's most telling about his viewpoint are his most recent comments to the New York Times, where he said he doesn't believe that the Congress has a constitutional authority to conduct oversight. I think that means he's not reading Article 1 correctly, particularly our power to appropriate funds, and then, of course, ensure that those funds are used in accordance with the law. Here, the FBI and Department of Justice departed from the law. They did so because they were out to get Donald Trump, and now they want to evade oversight, and it's something we're not going to let them do.
Well, let's talk about Chairman Goodlatte and Gowdy have reached a deal with the DOJ to get production of documents they've been after for a long, long time. It sounds like there's progress on some of these fronts as far as cooperation with the DOJ. Why is that not enough for you?
Because we're not getting the documents fast enough, Shannon. We've requested 1.3 million documents, and we've received only a few thousand at a time. That's entirely inappropriate. And again, now Rosenstein has shown his cards. He says he doesn't believe that we have a constitutional ability to even conduct oversight. So here's what I think's happening. I think at the Department of Justice and at the FBI, they know they did wrong in these FISA warrants that were based on false information, where they were not disclosing all the material facts to the court. And so they're hoping that if this just takes long enough, and if they survive to the November elections, there's a chance that Democrats will take control, and then there will be no meaningful oversight. There'll just be a continuation of a witch hunt against the president. So time is not our friend, and that's why we need to act quickly.
Quickly on this idea of the fall elections, which you mentioned, Jennifer Rubin, who is billed as a conservative blogger over the Washington Post, says this: these people, meaning you guys talking about impeachment, are nuts and unfit to hold office. Enough. Vote them out. How does this factor into the fall?
Well, she has one vote just like everybody else. The folks in my district, and I think across the country, are fed up with the mistreatment of our president. We got a president who's out there trying to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, to face down Iran, and he's having to deal with this ludicrous investigation that was never based on fact, where there's been no evidence of collusion, and which, by the way, if there even was a prosecution, Rod Rosenstein would be a witness based on the questions that were released about James Comey's firing. So you can't oversee an investigation when you could potentially be a witness in that investigation. These aren't things that are nuts. We just want the law to be followed.
All right, well, keep us up to date if there's any progress on these articles. We know that we'll be watching, as well as the Deputy Attorney General. Congressman Gaetz, thank you.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live in Washington. These two matters, the now dead Senate proposal to protect the special counsel and this new threat to impeachment, They show a stark contrast in two Republican sets of views.
Shep, good afternoon. Senate GOP leadership does not think special counsel Robert Mueller needs protection, while some House conservatives say the Deputy Attorney General could use a push. The impeachment document from the Freedom Caucus lists 8 reasons for potentially impeaching Rod Rosenstein. Here's an example. Quote, failed his oath of office by refusing to discipline or recommend the removal of DOJ personnel after obtaining evidence of disqualifying conflicts of interest demonstrated throughout the course of the ongoing investigation regarding charging decisions in the investigation surrounding former Secretary Clinton's private email server in 2016. This afternoon, a member of that conservative group called impeachment a last option.
I think people expect us to do something in Congress, and that includes the investigation. I think it asks for maybe sometimes you have to come in and say maybe we should impeach somebody.
Other members of the Freedom Caucus say if you're not willing to do it, you're likely to keep getting stonewalled. Shep.
And from Rosenstein's colleagues, you're hearing what?
Well, last week it was announced the Justice Department had reached an agreement with two House chairmen, Trey Gowdy from Oversight, Bob Goodlatte from Judiciary. And Fox is told the Justice Department is making about 400,000 documents available for review. And viewing rooms have been set up for 12 congressional staffers to review that paperwork. A short time ago, Fox asked the deputy AG about the impeachment threat.
But I can tell you, there have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted.
Extorted, a pretty serious term. Rosenstein also joked the Freedom Caucus could not resist leaking its own document. Shep.
Mike Emanuel, thank you.
From Rod Rosenstein today, he was at an event and he was reacting to what he had heard and been reported about the Freedom Caucus potentially drawing up articles of impeachment against Rosenstein. This is what he said.
They can't even resist leaking their own drafts. I just don't have anything to say about documents like that, that nobody has the courage to put their name on and that they leak in that way. But I can tell you, there have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted.
Joe.
Well, I think Mr. Rosenstein has just shown his ignorance of the Constitution. Congress has demanded access to documents that it's entitled to under the Constitution pursuant to its oversight function. His refusal and obstructionism to turn over those documents has led to the confrontation, which is why they are considering his impeachment. If he thinks that's extortion, I suggest that he resign from office because he's clearly a legal incompetent.
Yeah, Meadows was suggesting that basically today, Saul, that, I mean, this whole extortion.
That's ridiculous.
This extortion line. I mean, it's as the deputy attorney general to throw around the word extortion when you're already, under a cloud of concern at the very least because of some of the makeup of the prosecutors, what's happened with the text messages, the failure to turn over documents.
The prosecutors. He didn't pick the prosecutors. I mean, Rod Rosenstein
I'm talking about over the investigation and in a prickly, it was like a Comey-esque, priggish, prickly manner to go, well, I can't believe it. I mean, it just looked undignified. It was very undignified.
What you see is a man
Please don't defame Rod by comparing him to Comey. Look, you've had these fights. What is it? You think it's okay for Trump to claim executive privilege vis-a-vis Mueller, but it's not okay for Rosenstein to resist Congress? That's been going on since Hector was a pup, and you know it. It's a back and forth.
I don't have any problem with. He can resist Congress, but he cannot refuse to turn over documents that Congress has a right to see. But here's the point. That use of the word extortion today was an absolute outrage on the part of a constitutional officer who is the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. That is unbecoming, and it's a fireable offense. He's not going to be fired because the president shouldn't do it.
Joe, you think everything's an outrage? Everything outrageous.
Actually, that's not true, Saul. And in fact, when the Deputy Attorney General of the United States uses the word extortion for Congress seeking documents it's entitled to under oversight, that is outrageous.
Yeah, so all I'll say is, look, the only reason they ever turned over the documents is because they were about to be slapped with contempt of Congress. That they had to go to that level to get the documents that they're entitled to get under their normal constitutional oversight obligation. It's their obligation.
Rod's going to get what he wanted. Rod wanted a fight. He's going to get it.
You know what? The president the president actually is higher up than Rod Rosenstein. It's an amazing thing in our system of government. At any time in the last 6 months, the president could have picked up the phone and told Rod Rosenstein,
we get it.
Instead of tweeting, not fired him. He could have said, Rod, turn that stuff over, and then Rod could have either said,
that would have worked well.
No, he's been told.
Oh, come on.
He's been told.
That's
the
ridiculous.
president has been told he cannot communicate with the Justice Department by Don McGahn, the White House counsel.
We're out of town. We're going to run to black. We're going to run to black.
I don't care what Don McGahn does. He's obviously not helping the president.
Guys, thank you.